You know you're good at something, but you really, really struggle to openly say that you're good at something, this thing that you're good at. What's going on here? In this episode of Self-Belief Unsquashed, we're going to really quickly have a look at this very human problem with, I suppose, self-promotion, if you like. We're just saying that we're good at something. And I'm not talking about, bragging and maybe making up that you're good at something. I'm talking about real, definite, experienced, known skills that you've got, things that you have been told that you're good at, things that you've probably worked years at and you're good at. I'm talking about those things. And you've got an opportunity to tell people that you're good at this thing and you don't want to. It feels catastrophically uncomfortable. What's going on? And more importantly, in this episode, we're going to have a look at ways that you might start to manage that issue. And the issue is what I call a dumbing down disaster, which is chapter 2 in my book, The Mystery of the Squashed Self. So I'll read a little extract from that, which might amuse you, and share some of the tips, well, experiments, if you like, that you might want to try out. This is particularly aimed at people who are running their own business, small business owners. I don't know whether that's the term anymore, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, people who are probably doing everything on their own and are growing, but they're being held back by this slightly uncomfortable, irrational thing of, I can't tell people that I'm good at that. I don't want to keep like putting my hand up and being the clever clogs. I want to give everyone else a chance to show that it's their thing that they're good at before I just plow in with telling them that I'm good. Oh, for goodness sakes, we've got to sort this out because you are being held back. And all of these are called self-squashers. And it means that you're suppressing your full power, personality, and passion out of a fear that if you reveal all of this, you're going to be judged as an unbearable show-off. Not so. It depends how you do it, why you do it, where you do it, and what the heck is going on around you in the context. And mainly, it's a thing you're doing up in your head to yourself, a self-squasher, holding you back from your jig, as I call it, joy, impact, and growth. Are you ready to dig down into this a bit? Does this resonate? I suspect it does. Let's have a look at your dumbing down disaster. I'm going to read you a little story, and it's one of the clients, small business owner, who comes to see Investigator Lewis. There are 8 cases in my book, and this is one of them. And there's a lot of humor and some exaggeration, but all of these stories that these clients bring to the investigator are based on my experience, the experience of my coaching clients and conversations I've had generally. They're very human, in other words. So this particular problem is, as I say, the dumbing down disaster. This person has a lovely little business that they're growing, but they just keep holding themselves back because they're afraid that everything about them is going to be unapproachable. Let me just share a little of this story and you'll see what I mean. It makes me unapproachable. People don't like show-offs. She's been talking about her background and her qualifications and all sorts. I don't like it when I see other people bragging. The investigator asked, what kind of bragging is that exactly? You know, those people who talk about how they've made 2 million in 2 weeks from a magic business success formula they have created, and they own a house in every country and a private jet and a gold-plated kitchen bar and I don't quite know where that last detail came from, but I let it pass. There was a lot of anger in her tone and body language. She continued, the kind of people who go on and on about volunteering in war-torn countries and constantly post pictures of themselves working at a local soup kitchen and doing charity runs. It all seems, well, it's like it's virtue signaling, isn't it? And I had heard enough. I stopped client S by shutting my notebook in that dramatic way that signals I am bringing proceedings to an end. Let me just fill that in a little bit. This particular case was of somebody who had grown up in quite a posh way with a very intelligent father who'd been some science researcher, a mother who did lots of volunteering work, and she'd got all sorts of qualifications, degrees, PhDs, mentor awards, all sorts. And she was absolutely crippled by the idea that if she let people know too much about her background, her qualifications, her skills, she would just be unapproachable. People would think she was showing off, bragging. So she tipped completely in the opposite direction and was dumbing down, if you like, was almost pretending she didn't know stuff, and allowing other people to be the ones that were the thought leaders, and she would just sort of follow, even although she knew the stuff they were talking about, and she could have been that first one to make that point at a debate, on a panel, on a podcast, on LinkedIn, wherever. But no, she was so crippled by this idea that she would be seen as unapproachable, dislikable, like the girl at school that she was, who didn't dare put up her hand, or at least when she did, because she was highly intelligent and she knew the answer to lots of stuff, she got bullied for it. As she was a show off. She was a clever clogs. Nobody likes clever clogs. Even had that message inadvertently given to her by her parents. Oh, no, come on, don't brag. Nobody likes a show off, when she was literally asked to tell people about some award, some exam she'd passed. So those little subliminal niggle messages that get into us from our past need to be put out on the forensics table. I always talk about the fibs that hold us back. And in this case, we're talking, as always, about fear of rejection, illusions, and that one is more subtle. I'll come back to that, and baggage, the fibs that hold us back. Now, the baggage I've just referred to, school, parents, nobody trying to be deliberately really nasty, but these things can stay with you, and you're still sat on that naughty step, if you like, that you were put on in your childhood, and you have every freedom to get off, and yet you're keeping yourself on it. You're keeping yourself restrained, held back out of this fear of rejection. So that's fear, that's baggage. And the illusion, I suppose, is I talk about all sorts of society stuff that comes at us, that, what is the definition of success, and why do we assume that this is this and that is that, and all the media stuff that we get fed. But in this case, it's also just assumptions, an illusion that people are thinking something. You assume they're not going to want to hear about your achievements, your skills, your experience. Is that even a true thing? Probably not. And it will, and this is the important message, depend on how and why and where and when you share these things that you are or should be proud of. You're right, nobody likes a show off, but, and here's the kicker, you're not a show off unless you're showing off. Drum roll, please. I'm going to repeat it. You're not a show off unless you're showing off. And you might be saying, yeah, I tend to do that. I don't speak up when I could do, because I'm thinking, oh no, they're thinking, here she goes again. But you're making a huge assumption. You think that you can read other people's minds. You can't. The only way that people are going to get aggravated by you speaking up is if you overtalk, if you interrupt people, if you are a very, very bad listener and you just simply go on to broadcast mode and you're yeah, bragging in a sort of non-inclusive, sharey way, or, you show absolutely no vulnerabilities. You don't share any of the things that have gone wrong in your world as you grow your business and all the rest of it. Yeah, that would get annoying, wouldn't it? Of course it would. And it wouldn't be authentic. It would come across as a real barrier in terms of trust and all the rest of it. And people would get pretty sick of it. But you're not going to do that. Your problem is the opposite. Your problem, you can tweak your dial up considerably before you get even close to being like that, because you're keeping everything turned down so much. I often talk about the visual, if you like, of a mixer board, like the record producers have, all those sliders, and you can be in charge of your mixer board. You can slide things up and down. So in this case, you're going to need to slide that one up a little bit that is about telling people the stuff you're good at. And you're going to need to slide down the one that is all about, I mustn't, they'll think I'm a show off. Being considerably older has made it acceptable in a way for me to show off in a nice way. I don't know. It's something about just shedding some of those self-conscious aspects that we have when we're younger. And in fact, I had for most of my life until I reached probably my 60s. So I get that this isn't easy. And for me, it is now easier. I also am known as having quite a good sense of humor, if you like. I'm quite a little bit quirky, a little bit crazy in some respects. And that also has been easier to be and release as I've got older, because that is me. But having that aspect of my communication style means that I can actually, if you like, brag about something and almost make it a little bit humorous, which takes an edge off it for me and for the receiver. So I get that I've probably got a few things that I've worked on, things that are easier as I've got older, and with my particular communication style that is authentically me. So yeah, I'm not saying this is a piece of cake, you can do this, but it's worth giving it a go and applying it to your own style. You at all times got to apply this to who you are, not obviously who I am. That would be daft. So what are the tips and recommendations and conclusions that the investigator puts in her report? Well, firstly, all the reports that the investigator does at the end of each of these 8 chapters are also based on her conversations with her friend, Professor P. This was my way of getting a little bit of psychology, a little bit of research into the mix, but not making it too heavy or dull. So Professor P is also another character, and there's quite a lot of interaction between her and Investigator Lewis. In terms of this dumbing down disaster chapter, when the investigator asked her for her input, she talks about a number of things, and she picks out this phrase that the investigator has put in her notes. This phrase, for instance, I have this awful feeling that people in my network are being nice but secretly hating me. Well, she comes up with this. I'm confident that her fears are based on feelings, not facts. However, feelings are not to be dismissed. Our brains are not the error-free computers we sometimes assume. They make predictions, and sometimes these predictions are not right. A feeling can be misinterpreted as a sign of something, often a threat, when it might not be. So look at this phrase. I don't have a lot of friends at school. I was just known as the class swot and teacher's pet. Once more, your client is remembering a feeling of sadness, loneliness, embarrassment even. However, in this case, it is more than a feeling. It's driven by actual events, the behavior of her mean but perfectly human classmates. Yes, some of the stuff from your baggage, it actually did happen. You remember how you felt. You remember that for a long, long time. But a lot of the stuff is not even based on fact. That's what she's saying. You're just predicting, you're assuming that you're under threat. You're assuming that if you do this next thing, you're going to be rejected and hated. So in the report, the investigator concludes this. The anger you are feeling towards other people and your situation is likely to be frustration with yourself for not being yourself. And that is a common link throughout all of these self-squashers. The following could be the drivers of this frustration. 1, you're still sitting on the naughty step and carrying a rucksack full of childhood baggage. Yes. 2, the idea of not being acceptable or loved by parents and friends was unthinkable when you were growing up, so doing whatever avoided that was essential. 3, you are now an adult. You have no proof that if you come out as you, people will find you unapproachable. It is more likely that not being you will have that effect. Nice. You won't be a show-off if you're not showing off. I've repeated that deliberately. Sharing your achievements can be done in a way that is not the same as showing off. And we're going to get to a little tip or two on that in a minute. And finally, when you share your achievements, you give others permission to share theirs. You give them that gift. You are a caring person. Think of it as something that helps others. So then the recommendations, and this is things that you could try. Now, in particular reference to this client, and this is the made up stuff, if you like, to a certain extent, she talks about, for instance, your PhD in gender equality in sports. The relevant connection to your business connections is what will help you share this skill, this qualification, without it seeming like you're showing off. So, for instance, if you talk about the constant resilience required to overcome the urge to give up on your PhD, the motivation you had to find to do that work, the extraordinary real human stories you found while researching and how they could illustrate a point in other contexts, etc. So in other words, she found the links and said, that's how you can share. Make it clear you are a beautifully flawed human. Use some humor. Crack your own case is a piece that I put at the end of each chapter, and it's an unsquashing action that you can experiment with. So it's not directly part of the storytelling. This is just something for you, the reader, to try. So you, the listener, can try this. When it comes to your professional network, you might well have a LinkedIn profile. So how about rewriting that profile or an about page or whatever it is on your website with your personal section and your achievements and publications, etc., split. Now, to a certain extent, you're offered that opportunity on LinkedIn, but just find that split, which means that you're kind of able to chuck all those fabulous qualifications in almost as a list, but the personal section is just more human. Keep it short, use real language, and add personality. You might also go further than that, and you might consider creating a talk that pulls on some of your childhood baggage in a way that resonates and empowers. It doesn't need to be a complete heart-on-sleeve event. Just find some links, connections, themes, relevance, and harness the engaging power of story. It's finding those links, finding that mix, find ways of sharing your fabulousness that just sort of resonate with people. People will be able to share in that. Ultimately, just have moments where you say, do you know what I'm really good at? I'm good at this. Just understand that that isn't showing off, because it's probably a context in which people are wanting that skill, and therefore you're offering them something helpful. The other thing, of course, is accepting the compliments and the feedback when you get them. Oh, you're so good at. So don't then say, oh, do you think so? Oh, I'm not really. I mean, I know other people who are better at this. And yeah, that's a bit fluky. I don't normally do it that well. Or no, it's all part of this not dumbing down, is to be able to accept compliments. You are not good at every single thing. Other people will be better at things than you are, and vice versa. And that makes up this glorious mix where we can all help and learn from each other. So if you don't share, people won't be given that gift, will they? Hope that helps. It's really just a reminder, like all these episodes, it's a nudge to stop whatever that self-squashing thing is that you're doing. very human. You'll constantly have to come back and remind yourself. When you spot yourself doing it, say, I think I'm doing this dumbing down thing for no good reason. Stop it. And next time you're at an event or in a conversation, or maybe even contributing to a thread or a post on social media in your line of business, don't think, I better not go in there with some comment. I'll let other people do it because otherwise they think I'm showing off. Go in there. But first of all, do the sort of yes and rather than the yes but. Make sure you're inclusive in the way that you're giving this input. So the first thing you do is be interested in what the person has said. And then you might add a little different perspective. And at that point, you might say, when I was doing XYZ, so you're showing you've got this experience, I was fascinated by blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if anyone else has come across that, because I'd be interested in your perspective. I mean, that's how you get over any sense that you're showing off. But ultimately, you can also have moments where you just plain beautifully brag. And there is a book about this, actually. I might put a link. Apart from my book, there's a book by Peggy Klaus called The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn. So I'll give you that one as another reference point. Remember, stay curious and unsquashed. If you want to know more about where to get the book and actually read a sample chapter, then just head over to trishalewis.com and it's all there, along with other unsquashing resources. Fill your boots, basically. I'm about to do a new series of this podcast, and you might be relieved. It's one in which I will be interviewing people, so it won't just be my voice. Although, might I just say, I do have a good voice.